Welcome to Night Shift Knowledge, a quiet place in the late hours where you can finally let go of the day. Take a moment to settle in, soften your shoulders, and allow the busy world to fade completely into the background. Tonight, we are going on a gentle journey through the fascinating corners of science, biology, and history. Before we begin, please know that the screen will fade to dark very soon. You can safely rest your eyes and leave this video playing as you drift off to sleep. I would also love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below with a general topic you would like me to cover in a future video. It is always a pleasure to read your ideas and shape this channel around what brings you peace. If you find comfort in this space, a like and a subscribe would be deeply appreciated. To ensure the next video quietly finds its way to you, please tap the notification bell. So as your breathing slows and your room grows a little darker, let your curiosity drift along with my voice. Let us begin. Imagine a town where the sun disappears for half the year. Not behind clouds, but behind stone. This is Rjukan, Norway. A place built in the shadow of giants. You're in a deep, narrow valley, a slash in the earth carved by ancient ice. To your east and west, mountains rise like colossal walls. They're beautiful and majestic, but they are also a prison of sorts, a prison for light. From late September until the middle of March, the sun never reaches the streets below. It arcs across the sky, just over the southern ridge, but its rays are forever blocked. The town lives in a perpetual twilight, a deep blue gloom they call the blue months. The king of these mountains is Gaustatoppen. It towers nearly 2,000 meters high. In summer, it's a hiker's paradise. In winter, it's a silent sentinel, ensuring the shadow stays put. This isn't a quirk of weather, it's simple, brutal geometry. The valley runs north to south. In winter, with the earth tilted away, the sun stays so low on the horizon that it simply cannot clear the mountain rim. It's a physical impossibility. The light is there, just over the ridge, but the people below are in another world. Living in that world has a profound effect. Let's listen to a resident Kari. Her voice is warm but carries the weight of many winters. You start to feel it in October. The light just drains away. It's not like a normal cloudy day. It's a flat light, a cold light. Your body knows it's daytime, but your soul feels like it's always 3 in the afternoon on a November Sunday. The psychological impact is real and documented. Seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is a common guest here. The lack of sunlight disrupts your circadian rhythm, your body's internal clock. It can drain your energy, make you sleepy, and dampen your mood. It's a heaviness that settles on the whole community. Then there's the physical cost. Sunlight is our primary source of vitamin D. Without it, the body struggles. People here have to be proactive. They take supplements. They eat a lot of fatty fish. But it's a constant negotiation with the environment. It's more than just chemicals and hormones. It's a deep human longing. Another local, an older man named Lars, describes it. You develop a kind of light envy. You see a patch of sun high up on the mountainside, glowing on the rocks and the snow. And you just stare at it. You wish you could climb up there just to stand in it for a minute, to feel the warmth on your face. It becomes an obsession. For generations, this was simply life in Rjukan. You bundled up. You turned on the lamps. You waited for spring. The mountains gave the town its reason for being, its power and its industry, but they also took something fundamental away. The community adapted, of course. They painted their houses in bright yellows and reds to fight the gloom. They strung lights everywhere. but it was a substitute, an imitation of the real thing. There's a particular sound to a Rjukan winter. It's quiet, but it's not silent. It's the crunch of boots on hard snow under a slate-grey sky. It's the low hum of generators and machinery. It's the absence of birdsong. And underneath it all, a shared, unspoken question. A wondering, what if? What if we could bring that patch of sunlight down from the mountain? What if we could steal just a little bit back? This longing, this collective dream, is the heart of our story. It's a desire that began over a century ago with a visionary industrialist who saw the town's potential and its profound problem. A dream that would lay dormant for decades, waiting for the right moment and the right person to bring it into the light. That story begins in the shadow of the mountains and in the mind of a man named Sam Ide. But that is for the next chapter. But the story of Rjukan's shadow begins with a dream of light and power. It's the early 1900s. Norway has just gained its independence. A visionary industrialist named Sam Ide is looking at the thunderous Rjukanfossen waterfall. He sees the raw, untamed energy of falling water. He imagines harnessing it on an unprecedented scale to make fertilizer, to make explosives, to make a new Norway. This is the birth of Norsk Hydro, and it needs a home. Ide chooses this very valley. Not for its comfort, but for its power. The deep gorge is perfect for damming the river. The waterfalls become generators. The mountains were just part of the deal, a necessary obstacle. By 1911, the world's largest hydroelectric power station at the time is humming here. A town springs up almost overnight to house the thousands of workers. Rjukan is born from industry. It's a bustling, prosperous, modern town, a proud company town. But it's a town without a sun. The workers came from all over Norway. They brought their families. They built a community in this steep stone bowl. They had work and wages and modern homes. But what they didn't have for nearly half the year was the simple, fundamental warmth of sunlight on their faces. The very power that lit their factories couldn't light their town square. Children went to school in the dark and came home in the dark. The perpetual twilight of winter was the price of prosperity. Sam Ide, the town's founder, knew it. He wasn't just a businessman. He was, in a way, a patriarch. He saw the toll the darkness took on his people. He saw their pale faces. He heard the longing. So he began to dream of a solution. Not to move the town, but to move the sun. Sometime around 1928, Ide proposed something extraordinary, a giant mirror. It would be placed high on the mountainside to catch the sun over the southern ridge and beam it down into the valley. A brilliant, artistic, defiant idea. He even had an architect draw up plans. Imagine a vast, manually adjusted reflector. Workers would have to climb up and physically tilt it to follow the sun's slow arc across the winter sky. The technology of the time was simple: pulleys, cables, brute force. But the vision was pure science fiction. It was audacious. And it was, for its time, ultimately too complex, too expensive, too fragile for the brutal mountain winds. The board of Norsk Hydro looked at the plans and they said no. The dream was shelved. The shadow remained. But Ide was a practical man. If he couldn't bring the sun down to the people, he would bring the people up to the sun. So in that very same year, 1928, he did the next best thing. He built a lift, the Crosserbanen cable car, one of the first in Northern Europe. It was a gift to the townsfolk, a promise of light. They called it the Solheis, the sun lift. Every weekend, families would queue up. They'd step into the small wooden carriage, and with a lurch and a hum, it would carry them up, up, up the sheer rock face of the valley wall, 600 meters straight up. Picture the journey, the clatter of the machinery, the creak of the cables. The town shrinks below you, still locked in deep blue shadow. Then you crest the ridge, the doors open, and you are blasted with blinding, golden, glorious sunlight. It was a weekly pilgrimage, a necessary escape. Workers in their Sunday best stood on the rocky plateau, turning their faces to the sky like flowers, soaking it in. Children played in the light their parents built a town without. It was a relief valve, a compromise. For decades, this was the answer. The sun was a weekend excursion, a thing you visited, not a thing that visited you. So, for the better part of a century, Rjukan lived with this duality. A town of immense industrial power and profound natural deficit. A place that helped feed the world with fertilizer but couldn't get a simple sunbeam to its own main street. Sam Ide's mirror idea faded into local legend, a quirky footnote in the town's history, a dreamer's fantasy. The cable car was the reality. It worked. It was enough. But the longing never really went away. The idea of the mirror lingered in the collective memory of Rjukan, a what if whispered in the winter gloom. What if the mountain itself could be made to give back the light it stole? The industrialist's dream was planted. It would just take another lifetime and a very different kind of dreamer for it to finally break ground. So Sam Ide's grand industrial dream became Rjukan's permanent reality, a town carved by necessity, not sunlight. For decades, that was simply the price of living there. The shadow was part of the deal. The giant factory hummed. The community thrived in its own way. But that old dream of a mirror on the mountain didn't vanish. It just went dormant. It waited for the right person in the right moment to dig it up again. That person arrived in the year 2000. His name was Martin Anderson. He was an artist, and he moved to Rjukan with his family. Imagine that first winter. For Martin, it wasn't a historical fact or an industrial trade-off. It was a personal, physical experience. The greyness, the chill that seemed to seep into the bones of the buildings, the way the world felt flattened. He'd walk through the town square, a concrete space between the old factory buildings and the river, and he'd feel the collective longing. People would crane their necks, looking up at the narrow strip of sky, at the sunlit mountaintops far above. They were like plants, he thought, straining for light. He began to ask questions. How do you live here in this perpetual twilight? Someone, probably an old-timer, told him the story. About Sam Ide, about his wild idea from 1928. A mirror on the mountain. For Martin Anderson, this wasn't just a quirky historical footnote, it was a lightning bolt. The idea resonated with him deeply, not as an engineer, but as an artist. He saw it as a magnificent, impossible gesture, a piece of social sculpture. What if you could actually bend nature? Not with a dam or a factory, but with a reflection. What if you could give people back a fundamental piece of their humanity? A patch of sunlight to share? He became obsessed. He started sketching. He built small models. He presented the idea to anyone who would listen. At first, people thought he was a bit crazy. A charming dreamer. This was a practical, hard-working town. The idea of spending millions of kroner on a giant mirror seemed like a fantasy. But Martin was persistent. He reframed the project. It wasn't just a technical fix. It was a work of public art, a symbol of hope and community. He called it the soul spale, the sun mirror. He argued it would put Rjukan on the map in a new way, not as an industrial museum, but as a place of innovation and poetry. He found a few key allies. Some forward-thinking people in the municipal government saw the potential. They saw a tired town that needed a new story. Still, the skepticism was thick. The cost was enormous, around 5 million Norwegian kroner. For a town of just a few thousand people, that's a serious investment. People asked the obvious, brutal questions. Would it even work? The technology for a computer-controlled heliostat existed, sure. But in this valley, with the punishing Arctic winds, the tons of snow and ice, what if it just broke? What if it was a very expensive piece of scrap metal on a cliff? Then there was the question of necessity. Was this a need or a want? Some residents felt it was frivolous, a vanity project. They'd lived without the sun for generations. They were fine. They'd take the cable car up to the sunny plateau if they needed a fix. Why not spend that money on roads or schools? Martin and his supporters had to navigate this doubt. They organized public meetings. They showed how the light would move across the square. They talked about mental health, about community spirit, about creating a new winter destination. The debate was heated. It divided the town. The breakthrough came from stitching together a patchwork of funding. This wasn't going to be paid for by the town's coffers alone. They went hunting for grants. They applied for arts funding, for innovation funding, for tourism development funds. They courted private sponsors. The Norwegian company Hydro, the descendant of Sam Ide's original enterprise, came on board. It was a poetic full circle. The industrial giant that built the shadowed town was now helping to bring it light. Piece by piece, the money came together. The municipal council finally gave their crucial approval. The project was greenlit. But the pressure was now immense. They had the cash. They had the permission. Now they had to actually do it. They had to design a system that could survive a Norwegian winter on a mountainside. They had to build it, transport it, and install it on a near vertical cliff face, 450 meters above the town. The artist's vision was now a real, funded civic project. The dream was no longer on paper. It was a set of engineering drawings, a procurement list, a shipping schedule. The beautiful, simple idea now faced the cold, hard reality of physics and logistics. And the whole town was watching, some with hope, some with crossed arms, or wondering, can you really catch the sun in a mirror? So Martin Anderson had the vision. He had the community's growing support. And after a long fight, he even had the funding, roughly 5 million Norwegian kroner. Now came the hard part, actually building the thing, taking an artist's sketch and turning it into a machine that could survive on a Norwegian mountain. A machine that could catch the sun. This was no simple mirror on a wall. This was precision engineering for an environment that actively tries to destroy precision engineering. The team wasn't just building a sculpture, they were building a satellite dish, but one that had to work while being blasted by Arctic winds. And it had to work perfectly every single day for months. The concept was straightforward. 3 giant mirrors, each one 17 square meters. That's about the size of a small bedroom wall. They would be mounted on a rocky ledge high above the town, 450 meters up. Their job was simple: track the sun and bounce its light down into the town square, creating a 600 square meter patch of sunlight for people to stand in. Simple in theory, a nightmare in practice. First, the mirrors themselves. They couldn't be normal glass, too heavy, too fragile. They used a special, lightweight aluminum composite, polished to a brilliant finish. But a flat mirror wouldn't work. The sun is a point source. To create a focused beam that could travel that far and still be useful, each mirror had to be slightly concave, curved just so, like a satellite dish for light. Then the movement. Each massive mirror sits on a motorized mount, a robotic arm essentially. It has to move on 2 axes, tilting and rotating. following an arc across the sky. But it's not just following the sun. That's the easy bit. It has to calculate the exact angle of reflection every single second. The software has to know the mirror's precise location on the mountain, the exact coordinates of the town square target hundreds of meters below and away, and the real-time position of the sun in the sky. It solves that geometry problem constantly and instructs the motors to make tiny, imperceptible adjustments all day long. Imagine the focus of that beam, a mistake in the math, a glitch in the software, and that concentrated sunlight could hit something else. A building window. A car windshield on the road. It had to be perfectly safe, so the targeting was locked. The system was designed with fail-safes. If it lost communication or detected a problem, the mirrors would automatically swing to a safe stows position, pointing straight up or down, away from the town. But the software was the brains. The hardware had to be the brawn, and it had to survive on that mountainside. Getting the components up there was a project in itself. There's no road to the chosen ledge. Helicopters were too expensive for the whole job. So much of it was done the old way, hauled by hand. Teams carried heavy equipment up steep, rocky paths. They brought up the steel for the support frames, the motors, the control boxes. All of it, piece by piece. Then they had to anchor it all to the mountain. This isn't a gentle hill. It's a cliff face. They drilled into solid rock, setting deep foundations that could handle not just the weight, but the force. The wind force. Because the wind is the enemy. In that valley, storms can scream down from the peaks. The mirrors are like giant sails. The engineers had to calculate the wind load, the maximum force the structure could withstand before something buckled or snapped. The mounts had to be incredibly strong, but also incredibly precise. Strength usually sacrifices finesse. Here, they needed both. And then there's the ice. This is a place where moisture freezes to everything. A coating of ice on the mirror surface would scatter the light, make it useless. So they installed heating elements. Thin wires embedded behind the mirror surface, just enough to keep the frost from gaining a grip. A constant, low-level warmth fighting the deep cold. The whole system, from the heated mirrors to the rock-anchored frames, was built for one purpose: to create a reliable patch of sun. A public utility made of light. But on that mountain, reliability is a high bar. The team tested everything. They ran simulations. They checked the tracking algorithms against the real sun's path. They stressed the motors. They thought about everything that could go wrong. A power outage, a lightning strike, a once-in-a-century storm. Finally, in the summer of 2013, the installation was complete. 3 silent silver rectangles stood on the ledge, facing the sky, waiting. The cabling was run, the software was loaded. The town square below was marked, a target painted on the stones. But there was one last terrifying test. Before they could turn it on for the public, they had to turn it on for themselves, to see if it actually worked. The engineers and Martin Anderson gathered. The system was powered up, the date was set. The software began its calculations. The sun was in the sky. The motors whirred softly, orienting the mirrors. And then, a beam of light, brighter than anything that square had seen in winter, lanced down from the mountain. It wasn't gentle sunlight, not at first. It was a focused, intense, almost alien column of brilliance. It hit the cobblestones, and it held. As the sun moved, the mirrors moved. The spot of light stayed fixed on its target. It didn't waver. It didn't jump. It just was. The impossible had been engineered into existence. a century-old dream, now a functioning machine. The artist's vision was real, but it was still just a machine on a mountain. The real test wasn't engineering, it was human. What would happen when they finally gave the town back its sun? So, after all that engineering, after battling the mountain, the wind, and the cold, the system was finally ready. October 2013. The date was set for the official switch on. The morning of the big day arrived, and it was grey, completely overcast. A solid blanket of cloud hung over Rjukan, swallowing the mountain tops. You can imagine the tension in the town square. A crowd had gathered. Martin Anderson was there, along with town officials and hundreds of residents. They were all bundled up against the chill, looking up at the sky. They'd built this incredible machine to catch the sun. And the sun had decided not to show up. It was a very Norwegian kind of drama, a quiet, anxious waiting. People checked their watches. They glanced toward the mountain, though they couldn't see the mirrors up there on the ledge. All they could see was that thick, stubborn grey. The whole project, this 100-year dream, was waiting on a break in the clouds. And then it happened. Just a small gap. A sliver of brilliant blue appeared high above the valley rim. A single powerful beam of sunlight shot down, but not onto the town. It hit the mountain ledge 450 meters up. It hit the mirrors, and in the square, everyone felt it before they saw it. A sudden warmth on their faces, a golden light washing over the cobblestones. They looked down, and there it was. A giant, shimmering rectangle of sunlight. The first ever reflected beam. After a century of shadow, winter sunlight had finally, officially arrived in Rjukan. The sound that followed wasn't a roar, it was a collective sigh, a release of breath held for generations. Then came the cheers and the laughter. Children, who had only ever known a dark winter square, immediately sprinted into the bright patch. They threw off their coats. They started running, jumping, and chasing each other through this impossible pool of light. Elders moved more slowly. They found benches within the 600 square meter sunspot. They tilted their faces upward, eyes closed, letting the warmth soak into bones that had endured decades of long, dark winters. Some were smiling quietly. Others had tears cutting tracks through the cold air on their cheeks. It wasn't just light. It was a physical feeling of being remembered, of being touched by something the rest of the world took for granted. The square transformed in that instant. It was no longer just a place you passed through on a dark, cold day. It had become a destination, a purpose. The social heart of the town, which used to beat slower in winter, suddenly had a bright, warm, new rhythm, and this wasn't a one-day event. That was just the opening act. As October turned to November and the natural sun disappeared for its long winter sleep behind the mountains, the mirror ritual began. Every clear day, around noon, the sunspot would appear. Like clockwork. People planned their days around it. Office workers took their lunch breaks in the square, holding sandwiches in one hand, their faces turned up like sunflowers. Mothers with strollers would meet there. Teenagers would lounge on the steps. Pensioners would share a thermos of coffee. The square became a buzzing, open-air living room. For a few precious hours, winter felt normal, lively, even joyful. You could hear the difference. The constant, cheerful din of conversation and laughter replaced the quiet shuffle of boots on snow. The shrieks of playing kids echoed off the building walls. There was a new sound in Rjukan in winter, the sound of a community gathering in the light. The mechanics of it became part of daily life. People would check the weather forecast not just for rain or snow, but for clear skies. They'd say, "Looks like it'll be a mirror day tomorrow." They'd watch the clock, knowing the light would hit the square roughly between 11 and 1. It created a shared schedule, a common event that everyone experienced together, and it changed the psychology of the place. That profound sense of isolation, of being cut off from the natural cycle, began to soften. The sunspot was a daily reminder that the sun was still there, just over the mountain, that they weren't forgotten. It was a technological tether to the wider world, a daily dose of vitamin D, yes, but also a massive dose of vitamin hope. The project, called the Solspiel, was a success. Not just an engineering success, a human one. It did exactly what Sam I dreamed of in 1928 and what Martin Anderson fought for in the 2000s. It brought light to the people. But, as with any great story, success brings new questions. What happens after the celebration? Can a rectangle of reflected light really change a town's fate? The mirrors were shining now, but what would their legacy be? The sun had decided not to show up. The sky was a featureless grey, and the mountain was invisible behind a wall of cloud. The crowd waited. They had waited for 100 years. They could wait a little longer, and then came a break. A thin sliver of blue appeared high above. A faint, golden light began to bloom on the wall of the town square. It was weak, diluted by the clouds, but it was unmistakable. It was reflected sunlight. A quiet cheer went up, then grew into applause. Not a roar, but a release. A collective exhale. The mirrors were working. They had caught the sun. From that first tentative gleam, a new rhythm began in Rjukan. The mirrors became a clock, a solar clock. When the sunspot appeared on the square, people would emerge. They brought their coffee, their lunch, their children. They sat on the steps and felt the warmth on their faces. It wasn't the full blaze of summer, but it was direct, honest sunlight. A patch of gold about the size of a basketball court, moving slowly across the ground. It became the town's winter living room. Conversations happened there. Business deals. First dates. That simple act of gathering in a shared pool of light rewired the community's winter DNA. The deep-shadowed months were no longer a time of hibernation, but of congregation. The project, called the Solspiel, became more than a utility. It became a symbol. That symbol caught the world's attention. In 2015, Rjukan, along with its sister town Notodden, received a remarkable honor. They were inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The designation was for the Rjukan Notodden Industrial Heritage Site, recognizing the early 20th century hydroelectric plants and nitrate factories. But the UNESCO report specifically noted the mirrors. It cited them as a modern, living continuation of that same innovative spirit. The same audacity that harnessed waterfalls to make fertilizer was now harnessing sunlight to warm a town square. The mirrors connected Rjukan's past to its present, proving the town's story was not frozen in history but was still being written. The light also drew visitors. Tourism changed. People came not just for the industrial history, but for the light itself. They came in winter to stand in that reflected sunspot, to feel the engineering magic on their skin. The mirrors turned a problem into a destination. Civic pride, once tied to the factory's global output, found a new focus in this local, human-centered achievement. The town had solved its own problem for itself. And that self-determination resonated far beyond the valley. In the Norwegian village of Finse, high on the mountain plateau, another community faced a similar challenge. A railway station and a handful of buildings buried in snow and shadow for months. Inspired by Rjukan, they installed a smaller, single heliostat mirror in 2019. It reflects light onto the station building, a beacon for workers and travelers in that isolated, harsh environment. The idea spread because the need is universal. The need for light, for a reminder that the sun still exists even when you can't see it. And of course, there was a precedent. The Italian village of Biganella in the Alps had installed a smaller mirror system in 2006. It was a proof of concept. But Rjukan's project was different. It was bigger, more complex, a civic undertaking rather than a private one. It was engineering on an industrial scale, born from an industrial town. Rjukan didn't just borrow the idea, it evolved it, proving it could work on a grand scale for an entire community. So what's the legacy of these mirrors? It's not just the warmth on your face in December. It's a statement that geography is not destiny, that a town in a shadow can carve out its own patch of light. It's a testament to human ingenuity, yes, but also to human patience. This was a dream that took a century to realize. It required the vision of an industrialist, the persistence of an artist, the skill of engineers who battled wind and ice, and the faith of a town that kept the idea alive through generations. The mirrors are now part of Rjukan's heartbeat. They operate from October to March, following their precise digital choreography on the mountain ledge. They are maintained, checked, respected. They are a piece of infrastructure as vital as a road or a bridge. But they are also art. They are a performance, every sunny winter day, a performance of light and motion for an audience below. Listen to the square in winter now. You hear the murmur of conversation, the laughter of children playing in that bright rectangle. You hear the quiet hum of the mirrors themselves, adjusting almost imperceptibly on their mountaintop stage. It's the sound of a community that refused to accept the dark, that looked at its own mountains, the very walls of its world, and saw not just barriers, but potential. Potential for reflection. The story of Rjukan's mirror is a story about looking up at the impossible height of a mountain and deciding to put something there. Looking up at the blank, grey winter sky and waiting for a break in the clouds. Looking up at your own history and choosing to add a new chapter written in light. It's a reminder that sometimes the solution to a problem isn't to move the town or to ignore the shadow. It's to move the sun just a little, just enough. And so the legacy is cast, not in steel or concrete, but in a daily dancing beam of light. A legacy that says no valley is too deep, no winter too long, if you have the will to bend the light. Rjukan's giant mirror is more than a machine. It's an answer, 100 years old, finally spoken. An answer to the simple human question, is there sun today? And now, the town can always say yes. We have reached the end of tonight's topics, and it is time to let your mind completely unwind. Whatever you learned tonight, let it fade into a soft hum as you drift off. Thank you for being a part of Night Shift Knowledge and sharing this quiet space with me. Remember to leave a topic suggestion for next time if you are still awake, but for now, just rest. Sleep well, and I will be here the next time you need to quiet your mind. Good night.